This week's Parsha, we have the first mitzvah of the Torah, that basically the first mitzvah that we were given as a nation. Pasuk says, Hashem said to Moshe in the Haran in Eretz Mitzrayim, saying, this month shall be to you the first of all months, or the head of all months. This is the first to you of all the months of the year. So, we need to understand, number one, why didn't Hashem wait to give this mitzvah along with all other mitzvahs at Mount Har Sinai? Why did this mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, why was it given in Mitzrayim? Chazal, Rashi brings here from Chazal that when Hashem said HaChodesh Hazel Lochem, Hashem was pointing to the moon, the Levana b'chidusha, the Levana in its, as it was renewing itself. Hashem said to Moshe, Kezer Re'eh v'kadesh. When it looks like this is what you should see, and this is what you should sanctify.
Before the Shabbat month?
This is not Berachos HaChodesh. This is Kiddush HaChodesh. Yeah, big difference. So we need to understand why was it necessary for the Rebbeinu to show Moshe Rabbeinu the Levana b'chidusha. Later on in the Parsha, we also need to understand the Lashon Lachem. Chodesh is Lachem Rosh Chodesh. Chodesh for you, the first of all months. Obviously, the Moshe was talking to us. Obviously, it's Lachem. Later on in the Parsha, the Pasuk says, it will be when you will come to the land that Hashem will give you as He has spoken. You shall observe this avodah, referring to the Korban Pesach. Continues the Pasuk, it will be when your sons will say to you, what is this service to you? Now, we all know, who is this son? Which son are we talking about over here? Which son says, the
good son.
No, this is the Russian. Right?
They're all good.
This is the Ben HaRosh. It says in Haggadah, right? Now, the problem here is that there seems to be a contradiction here between the Baal Haggadah and the Pasuk, which actually creates a question on the Baal Haggadah. Right? The Pasuk says, it will be when your son will tell you, Amartem, you shall say, this is a Korban Pesach Hashem, who skipped over the houses of Bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim, when he smote the Mitzrayim as Matenu Hitzil, and he saved our houses. So, you're supposed to answer the Rasha like a mensch. You're supposed to answer Mamartu. You're supposed to say Zavach Pesach Chul Hashem. Why does Baal Haggadah say to answer a different teretz? To answer we got to the Vinkel, that tshuva is for the Sheni de Elisha later on in the Parsha. You got to the Vinkel, it says you should say to your son, and meanwhile he tells us, the Baal Haggadah says, tell that to the Rasha, and tell him to leave a leiloi, that Hashem only redeemed me, wouldn't have redeemed you. What's going on? Why does the Baal Haggadah deviate from what's written in the Pasuk? So I believe we can understand this with a story. It was Moshe Leib Sassav his Yahrzeit yesterday.
I heard a story yesterday. I heard today from
I'll tell you another story. So the Moshe Leib Sassav was once by his Rebbe, the Rebbe Melech of Lezhensk. He was there for Pesach. And one of the Sudas, the Rebbe Melech said to Moshe Leib to say Divrei Torah. So Moshe Leib said on the Pasuk this week's Parshas, Pasuk says, Hashem Hashem will pass over to smite the Mitzrayim. But also Adam al Mashkov, he will see the blood on the lentil al Shtei Mezuzos and on the two doorposts. Upasach Hashem al Pesach, and Hashem will skip over the door. So the Moshe Leib asked, it should have said in the Pasuk Hashem may Allah Pesach. Hashem will skip over the door. It says the Pasuk Hashem Allah Pesach. Hashem will skip on the door.
What's the difference really? What's the real difference between the two?
One is
And
skipping on the door, and one is skipping over the door. So the Moshe Leib said that when the Rebbeinu Shalom saw that Bnei Yisrael fulfilled his mitzvah, and they slaughtered the Korban Pesach, and then they put the blood on the doorposts, the Rebbeinu Shalom started dancing by the doors of Bnei Yisrael. Pasach Hashem Allah Pesach, Hashem started dancing on the doors. You know, and Hashem started, as Hashem said, Du voin ta'yid, du voin ta'yid. Here lives the Jew, here lives the Jew. And when Moshe Leib said the story, he became so excited that he got up and started jumping on the table. Du voin ta'yid, du voin ta'yid. So, to get a little bit more, a little bit deeper insight into the story, Arizal says that a mitzvah that we perform in our generation, like Arizal was talking about his generation, the halachas kama v'kama, we in our generation, a mitzvah, a small mitzvah, says the Arizal, that we perform in our generation is worth much, much more than the greatest mitzvah that was performed in the times of the Tanoim and Amoraim. Because, says Arizal, the pasuk says Yisrael na'or v'nachashich. Right? The advantage of light is only seen through darkness. I mean, you have when it's dark, then light is very much appreciated. However, when it's light, then you bring a candle into the room. That it's what does the light in broad daylight accomplish? So he says that we live in times of darkness. Ki ner mitzvah v'torah or. Mitzvah is a ner, Torah is a light. Every mitzvah we do, every Torah that we learn, is bringing a light into darkness. It has a tremendous effect. Whereas in times of light, in the times of Tanoim and Amoraim, which were times of light, those same mitzvahs, or even mitzvahs that were much greater than that, didn't have that type of effect because it was a light in times of light. That's what Arizal says. So according to this, we can understand that when Bnei Yisrael were in Mem Teshar and Tumah, in Mitzrayim, in the Ervas Ha'aretz, it was the darkest times for them physically and spiritually. So when they performed the mitzvah of Korban Pesach and put the blood on the doorposts, it made such a tremendous nachas ruach to the Rebbeinu Shalom, more than any mitzvah that might have been accomplished by Mei Avos. And it brought a tremendous light into the darkness. And this, I believe, is the significance of the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. What is Kiddush HaChodesh? It's to take the Levana B'Chidusha. It's a sliver of light in a sky of darkness. The Rebbeinu Shalom said to Moshe Rabbeinu, this mitzvah represents the power of all mitzvahs, and this is why it's the first mitzvah of the Torah. This mitzvah represents the power of mitzvahs. Kezera Eve Kadesh. When you see something, even as tiny as a sliver of light as that is, sanctify it because it's a sliver of light in a sky full of darkness. And that is how we need to be mekadesh the mitzvahs in our own lives. That's how we need to treasure and realize how precious our mitzvahs are, because any mitzvah that we do is a sliver of light. Even if it's a sliver of light, it's in a sky full of darkness. And that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom uses the word lochem. Meaning because this mitzvah has a specific effect dependent on your level. So HaChodesh Hazeh is lochem Rosh Chodashim. Depending on your level, it can be the highest of all mitzvahs. It's not like any other mitzvah, or it doesn't represent, or it represents that any other mitzvah doesn't represent. It has to do with lochem. It has to do with the level you're on, and the lower level a person is on, the greater effect their mitzvah is going to be. So this mitzvah of Korban Pesach, right, was a mitzvah that Klal Yisrael performed in Mem Tashari Tumah. Now, one would have thought that since this was a mitzvah that Klal Yisrael needed to perform in Mem Tashari Tumah to make such a tremendous nachas ruach, to shine a light into darkness, so one would have thought that when we come to Eretz Yisrael, which becomes a time of light, that it's no longer necessary to bring a Korban Pesach. Says the pasuk, it will be when you will come to the land Asher Yiten Hashem Lechem Kasher Diber. Don't think that you don't have to bring the Korban Pesach anymore. You should still do this mitzvah, this avodah. And the reason for this is, why do we need to, now it's a time of light, why do we need to perform the mitzvah that was specifically given to perform when we're going to Mem Tashari Tumah? I think we're going to stand it based on a mashal. There was parents had a child that was a wonderful child, developing as a child should, and all of a sudden the child falls deathly ill, Rahman al-Azal. And his matzah deteriorates to the point that the child is mamish a vegetable. Can't even talk, can't move a limb. Goes to the doctors give up any hope, and this child is laying there for weeks, and months, and years, doesn't move. And one day the father is sitting by the child's bed, and all of a sudden he hears the child say, "Tati." Can we imagine the simcha of the father? The father jumps up and he can't even believe his ears. The child said Tati, and he runs out and he calls everybody in. He said, Moshe said Tati. And Baruch Hashem, from that point on, the child's matzah starts getting better and better. And Baruch Hashem, he's ka'achad adam, he's back to himself. And he goes to school. And one day he comes home, a couple months later, he comes home with a bad mark on his desk. And he sees the disappointment in his father's eyes. And he says, Tati, a couple months ago, you were dancing that I said the word Tati. You're going to be disappointed about a low mark on my test now? When we're living in Eretz Yisrael, and sometimes we don't do things. Sometimes we're a disappointment to the Rebbeinu Shalom. We need to bring that Korban Pesach to arouse this midah of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Rebbeinu Shalom, you remember we said Tati when we were in Mem Tashari Tumah? We performed this mitzvah of Korban Pesach when we were on such a low level. It made you were jumping, you were dancing at our doorpost. Duvar Tagid. How are you going to be disappointed with? And the Rebbeinu Shalom tells us to do this. It arouses his midas ahava to us. Says the Rebbeinu Shalom. Now, we said before, this midah is called lochem. Right? This midah is called lochem. It's based on our level. So, so we're going to have, chas v'shalom, a ben harasha, a wicked son that's going to be sitting at the table. And we're going to be talking about the Korban Pesach. We're going to be talking about the Korban Pesach, of how the Rebbeinu Shalom has such tremendous nachas, specifically because we were in Mem Tashari Tumah. So our son is going to say, he'll be this oyer. Tell me more about this avodah of lachem. It really speaks to me. I find myself, says this Ben Rasha, in Memtashari Tumah. You know what? Maybe if I start doing tshuva, if I start doing mitzvahs, the Rebbeinu Shalom will have just such tremendous nachas from me. Says the pasuk, and yes, you should encourage him. You should tell him Zavach Pesach Ul Hashem. Yes, this is what this Korban Pesach is about. Hashem Pesach Al Batam and Eisrael Mitzrayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom was dancing in our doorposts. Duvain Tayid. That's the rush of the pasuk. But the Baal Haggadah is talking to Yidden and Golos. When there is no Korban Pesach. And all that there, this person, the Rasha in the Haggadah is scoffing. He's not inquiring about this avodah of Kod Lachem. He's talking about an avodah of Lachem. He says Lachem v'lo Eloi. He has given up on himself. Well, when it does this Lachem, this avodah is for you. It's not for me. That's the worst. When he gives up, he despairs that it's not for him. It's the opposite Rasha of the Torah, what the Torah is talking about. The Rasha the Torah is talking about is the Rasha that gets the message of the Korban Pesach. That's specifically for somebody who's an Emtashari Tum. The Rasha in the Haggadah is the Rasha that says, it's not for me. This avodah of bringing back a memory of a matzah that we used to be in order to arouse the Rebbeinu Shalom's compassion. Like the child reminding the father that he said Tati. It's called borrowing. It's called borrowing. We're borrowing a time that is no longer now. We're borrowing a time from the past. Right? We're borrowing that time that we were a Memta Shari Tumah, or that we were so sick we couldn't even say Tati. And we're using it to arouse the Rebbeinu Shalom, our Father in Heaven's compassion. The child that doesn't know how to borrow is called the She'eni Yedei Elisha. She'eni doesn't know how to borrow. What do you say to the She'eni Yedei Elisha? The Rebbeinu Shalom took me out of Mitzrayim because I did mitzvahs in Mem Tashari Tumah. Unlike you, who's despaired, and you say it's not for you. It's specifically for you. It's specifically when you would do a mitzvah in Mem Tashari Tumah, you'll bring such tremendous nachas to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Yomartem Zavach Pesach Ul Hashem. That is the so it's a this avodah of the Korban Pesach is a tremendous lesson for each and every one of us. No matter where we're holding, to realize that that's not just no matter where we're holding, specifically because we're on a low level, that brings so much more light into the darkness, and that's the avodah of Kiddush HaChodesh, a sliver of light in the sky of darkness. That's the message. That's the first mitzvah of the Torah, to teach us the power of mitzvahs. It's a light, and when that light is in a sea of darkness, it makes a tremendous impression. We shall be zeicha to bring the Rebbeinu Shalom a lots of nachas, and we should be zeicha to the time of light, and we're all gathered back into our Tzenu HaKadosh, B'Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'Meher B'Yameinu Amen.